Welcome to ETTT. In this session, I want to share and discuss on how to design blended learning with e-learning. I'm sure that all of you know how to design your own learning materials, but when dealing with e-learning, your design must have an add-on engaging tools. Why? Because this will tie the audience to their seats till the end of the session. But before we go on to the design method, just a quick question. Do you know what is a blended learning? Well, blended learning is a mixture of face-to-face time and online time in a class. It means that the participants can view all the resources beforehand and they meet in classroom for discussion. It can include anywhere between 20 to 80% of the course time online. This will then increase the opportunities for students to connect to each other, as well as the chance to utilize a wider array of online resources and technologies to enhance their classroom time. Now, what do we do in the classroom? Normally, in a classroom, facilitators will do less tasks compared to the participants because the participants will be doing all the activities and exercises given by the facilitators. Yes, less us, more them. How about online learning? In online learning, facilitators will do more tasks compared to the participants. They will have to prepare more in order to engage with the students. Before we proceed, let's take a look at this video so that you know more about blended learning.
As online learning becomes the fastest growing form of education in the world, many traditional institutions and instructors are using it in their classroom. The use of face-to-face instruction and computer-mediated or online learning is called blended learning. The concept of blended learning is only a revelation for those who have been trying to do everything with just one tool. In the old days, it was just lecturing and hoping the sponges sitting in front of you soaked everything up. In modern times, it's simply pointing students to a computer and expecting them to learn. And in both cases, instructor and students end up with less than ideal results. Good classroom teachers have always blended their methods. Reading, writing, lectures, discussions, small groups, and projects, to name a few, are all part of an effective blended classroom. These varied instructional strategies are a combination of different modes of delivery and different styles of instruction. Understanding that using the right tool in the right situation for the right purpose should be a guiding instructional design principle. With the advances in technology, today's blended learning approach effectively combines two things that make each other more powerful. A face-to-face classroom with a talented teacher combined with technology and computer-mediated activities, these two can form a synergistic, integrated instructional approach.
So coming back to the question how to design a blended learning in e-learning. You can follow any kind of design that you may have in mind, or as you always do, but to make it practical and easy, you can use these 3 steps: scope, design, and produce. Let's take a look at the scope section. In scope section, you need to know what is your objectives of this session, explain the product knowledge and acknowledge the subject matter, and what to achieve at the end of the program. This will help you to have a bigger and wider idea on how to design the curriculum. Next, design section. Based on the scope that you have identified, please ensure 1. When designing, you need to know your audience background so that the materials curated is within the audience capacity. 2. You need to know the online platform used. There are many types of platforms for online learning. Just to name a few, you can use Zoom, WebEx meetings, Google Meet, and MS Teams. Do know how to operate each of the platforms because it will ease you and your participants during the session. 3. Time is precious. Allocation of time is very crucial because time will help you prepare your slides, activities, quiz, feedbacks, and assessments. On top of that, You can always search in the internet other engaging tools to help you run your session smoothly and fun. Produce section. When all thoughts are in place, just before running the show, remember to deposit all your materials in a place easily accessible. That is depository of material, DOM. Here are a few examples of DOM that you can use: Google Classroom, Moodle, Talent LMS. There are many more in the net that you can use and try. Choose the one that suits you best. Usage of DOM is very practical and participants will be easily directed at any time. User interface. Last but not least, please ensure your user interface is neat and clear before conducting the session to avoid any technical issues later in the session. If possible, do a dry run a day before just to see everything is in place. Other than that, you're good to go. Before I say goodbye, let's take a look on how you create a storyboard. This is very important for e-learning design.
Elements do you include on a storyboard when you write out a storyboard? I'm curious to know, what detail do you go into? A lot of detail. They can include a lot of detail, or they can be very minimalistic. Storyboards might include narration dialogue. If you're going to be having an e-learning course that has scripted audio narration, obviously you'll probably want to include that narration dialogue. Your storyboard might include some sort of programming notes. If you are just simply an instructional designer and you're going to be handing your course off to an e-learning developer to put it together in an authoring tool, you might need to include some programming notes about what happens when a user clicks on a button, or what are some navigation restrictions that are in place. Slide numbers. You might want to reference a specific slide number. That's something typically put in a storyboard, and you might use those slide numbers not only just so it's easier for editing to identify an individual slide, but those slide numbers might correlate to the authoring tool. They might also correlate to audio narration files. It's very important if you have your audio professionally recorded, or even if you don't have your audio professionally recorded, even if you're just doing it yourself and you're recording your audio narration, it's important to know what file goes with which slide of dialogue, and so you might use slide numbers to help organize that content. And two things popped up that wasn't supposed to happen. But learning objectives. You might include learning objectives. You might also include in your storyboard at the beginning, there might be sections to outline the objective of the course, the purpose, the audience, the stakeholders, the business objectives, the performance objectives, all sorts of stuff like that might be included in a storyboard, especially if it's something that's going to be used not only for designing the course, but also used for ongoing strategy discussions with your stakeholders, if you will. Interactivity notes, kind of going back to the programming notes. You might include some interactivity notes. If you have a branching scenario, you might need to explain, especially for your subject matter experts, if they're not e-learning developers. You might have to include notes that say, there are two buttons on the screen. If the user clicks button 1, it'll take them down this path. If they click button 2, it'll take them down this path. It's important to include that detail because, again, the people reviewing your course may or may not have an understanding of what e-learning is or interactivity is. And graphic suggestions. Yeah, many of you mentioned this. You might have graphic suggestions to include, details about what image might be used to represent the content. You might actually include images in your storyboard. Pictures that you might use or graphics that correlate to the text. Again, that's important to help your people reviewing it or people designing your course to visualize what might be on the screen. A slide-to-slide flowchart. This is another thing that I do in my storyboards. I don't think anyone mentioned this, but if I have a course that I know is going to have some complex branching, let's say we're going to have a main menu and the learner's going to go down these different sections, I might include a slide-to-slide flowchart, kind of like a visual table of contents at the beginning of my course where there's boxes for each individual slide, and it shows how the course is navigated so that when your subject matter experts review the course, they might have some sort of mental map about the way that course flows. And Amy, just like story view and storyline, where you can see that high-level overview. I might do something like that to help people visualize from slide to slide. how the learner progresses. Because when you're working with a written storyboard, it's linear. You have slide 1, slide 2, and it goes, from top to bottom. So it's hard to visualize branching navigation in a storyboard. So I might include something like that. And then Jenny says, what do you use to show flowcharts? They get so big. Yeah, it depends. It depends on how large the course is and how much detail you want to go into. Sometimes I'll build something, simply using shapes and lines in PowerPoint. I might keep it at a high level. I may not represent every single slide within it. I might say, here's my introduction, and that's one box, and that indicates slides 1 through 5. And then I might have a box for the main menu, and it shows a branching to section 1, which might be slides 6 through 10, and then 11 through 15, and then 16 through 20 in separate boxes. It depends on the size of your course and how much detail you want to go into. But there are all sorts of flowchart tools out there. Shannon mentions Lucidchart. I've never heard of that one before. I'll have to check that out. But anything where you can